The Disappearance of Bobby Dunbar, USA, 1912. Have you ever heard a story so tangled in time that it feels like a curse still whispering through the cypress trees? A century ago, in the swamp-fringed heart of Louisiana, a 4-year-old boy vanished during what should have been the simplest of family outings. Newspapers called it an accident, preachers called it a test of faith, but the townsfolk of Opelousas learned to call it something else entirely, the day innocence drowned and the shadows learned your name. This is the real story one soaked in brackish water and sealed by fearful silence of little Bobby Dunbar. 8 chapters of horror, obsession, and identity so twisted that even science needed 90 years to scream the truth. Tonight we pry open century-old coffins of rumor to exhume the nightmare still rattling inside. And we ask the question every parent dreads: when your child returns from the dark, how do you know it's really them? Close your eyes and picture Spanish moss dripping like funeral veils over dark water. Hear the bullfrogs groan a dirge that never ends. Smell the mix of wet earth and kerosene lanterns burning too late into an August night. In that humid stillness, one family's laughter was swallowed whole, replaced by the frantic splash of boots and a mother's scream that never found an echo. More than 100 years later, that scream still travels curling through courthouse archives, buried in yellowed newsprint, echoing in attic trunks where brittle photographs hide their secrets. Tonight, that someone brave or foolish enough to trace its path is you. So draw the curtains tight and forget the clock, because the story you're about to hear doesn't keep time. It keeps secrets, and secrets, once spoken aloud, have a habit of coming home with you. Real story, horror carved into American folklore. Our descent begins now. If the floorboards creak later or a child's laugh flickers down your hallway when no child should be awake, remember, you chose to listen, and some names once whispered cannot be unsaid. Are you ready? The lantern is lit. We follow it all. The way into the swamp, all the way into the year 1912, where a boy named Bobby smiled for the last time, and a masquerade of identities began. Chapter 1. The day the water stole his name, before the legend curdled into newspaper ink, before strangers gathered at bonfires to whisper real story like a password against the dark, there was simply a boy and a lake. Picture Louisiana at dawn on August 23, 1912. Opelousas still yawns in half-sleep. Smoke spirals from chimneys, mule hooves click over cobblestones, and the smell of chicory coffee floats across clapboard porches. The Dunbar house crackles with quieter sounds, Leslie folding the picnic quilt, Percy oiling his cast-iron skillet, Bobby thumping down the stairs in boots far too heavy for a 4-year-old's ankles. He carries a dog-eared atlas, insisting they find Sway's Lake on the map so he can point to it later and say, "I conquered that water." The ride out is a dusty procession. The wagon's iron rims chew ruts through red clay roads while Spanish moss drips from live oak limbs like funeral crepe. Bobby chatters about catching frogs. Alonzo chews a twig and imitates him, every syllable a half-formed echo. Leslie hums hymns to keep the boys calm. Percy counts thunderheads bruising the horizon, hoping they'll hold their reign. To a passerby, nothing in this tableau hints at tragedy, but horror is patient. It walks behind us, barefoot, leaving no prints until we look back and see them everywhere. Sway's Lake appears all at once, as if someone knifed open the forest to reveal black water stitched with lilies and cypress knees. Locals call it a lake, yet in truth it is swamp masquerading as respectability, a labyrinth of peat, shadow, and old Choctaw superstitions about spirits who steal lost voices. The Dunbars set camp on a narrow spit of land jutting into the shallows. The quilt unfurls. The skillet hisses over a hickory stick fire. Dragonflies loop lazy figure eights above the boys' heads. Leslie slides her ring from finger to chain around her neck, safer while swimming, she says. Percy plants fishing poles in the mud and warns Bobby not to wander deeper than his knees. For a while the world cooperates. Bobby finds a willow branch and knights himself Sir Dunbar of Sways. He dips the branch into the water, drawing swirling runes only a child can read. Lessie dozes, dreaming of nothing at all, a mercy she will later resent. Percy guts. Perch, letting iridescent scales stick to his forearms like stars. Alonzo naps near the quilt, cheeks flushed, thumb tucked between tiny teeth. Then the moment.it is not dramatic. No lightning bolt, no shriek of violins, just a sound like someone dropping a peach into a well. Plop. Lessie's eyes open. The willow stick rocks on the surface, its twirling stopped. Bobby is simply absent, as though a page in reality were torn out mid-sentence. Confusion is polite at first. Bobby. Lessie's tone still expects an answer. Percy stands, wipes fish gore on his trousers, scanning shoreline, treeline, every line except the one between certainty and dread. Seconds. Stretch, sag, snap. Terror hammers its first nail when Lessie notices the water. Not a ripple, not a bubble, nothing disturbed beyond the lazy sway of the abandoned stick. Her scream splits the afternoon. Birds erupt from cypress crowns. A blue heron, startled, drops. Its catch, Percy plunges into knee-deep muck. Mud slurps over his boots, sucking at him like a hungry thing. He reaches for nothing, comes back with nothing. Lessie's breath turns ragged, each inhale a jagged tear through linen lungs. She lifts Alonzo to her hip and wades in, heedless of her dress angling in cattails. She calls again, voice cracking on the last consonant, Bo-B-B-Y. Echo laughs back once, then dies. The search ignites, word spreads by human chain faster than telegraph. Farmer Thibodeau hears the wail, gallops for town. Widow Hebert rings the church bell out of cycle. Boys on bicycles carry the news to fishing. Shacks along the Atchafalaya backwaters. By twilight, 40 volunteers line the bank with kerosene lanterns. Sheriff George Ledoux arrives, detaches his campaign hat, and mutters a prayer men only learn in war. Bloodhounds lope from the Baptist kennel, muzzles quivering at the mingled perfume of mud, fish rot, and something faintly lemony. Bobby's soap from that morning's hurried scrub. Dragnets scrawl the water. Each heave paints nightmare possibilities. A child's hat. No lily pad. A pale thing tangled in moss. Just driftwood. False relief curdles into fresh horror each minute. The nets rise empty. Thunder rolls. Lightning forks silently behind storm clouds, illuminating the cypress silhouettes like an X-ray of the swamp's bones. Lessie moves mechanically, ring blanket, pace 5 steps, fold arms, unwrap blanket, pace again. Every few minutes she whispers, "Tell Mama where you're hidin', sugar." No answer, only the choir of insects thickening with nightfall. Percy wades beyond the organized grid, rope belted to his waist, lantern clenched in teeth, when deputies haul him back. His skin is streaked with bleeding scratches, eyes feral with the kind of grief that arrests language before it leaves the mouth. Lightning finally cracks open the sky, flinging strobe light terror across the water. Rain accelerates from sprinkle to barrage, lanterns sputter, blink out. Yet still the search continues, men waist deep, women on shore chanting psalms, teenagers holding sheet metal torches high as if to threaten the heavens themselves. By 3 a.m. even prayers grow hoarse. Sheriff Ledoux orders a pause, his voice trembling at the word pause, as if stop would seal the child's fate. The lake's cruel silence at Abriac shows the cost. Rows of lanterns stand gutted, wicks curled like tiny burnt tongues. Draglines coil snake-like on shore. The water, slick as tar in morning light, betrays no clue, no scrap of sailor cloth, no small shoe, no tousled blonde hair snagged on a cypress. It is as if the lake resents their questions and answers with perfect, mocking stillness. Rumors sprout like fungus in the dank of uncertainty. Old Uncle Lamotte claims he saw a gator large as a rowboat slip beneath the dock yesterday. Fisherman Duplantis swears the boy was nabbed by itinerant gypsies. Widow Hebert mumbles about the rougarou the swamp wolf spirit said to collect. Unbaptized souls, Each story grows more fantastical, yet each finds an audience, for fear is fertile ground. Percy clings to facts, the water holds secrets. Secrets leave evidence. Evidence will surface. So he stays day after day, mapping the lake onto butcher paper, scribbling depths, currents, snags, turning grief into cartography. Leslie refuses to leave camp. She scrubs Bobby's blanket in the shallows until the stars fade, desperate to rinse away yesterday's scent so his new tomorrow can start clean. Meanwhile, Alonzo toddles between them, confused why no one laughs anymore. When hope lies, tragedy listens in the morning of the 8th day. A telegraph operator 40 miles upriver taps an electric heartbeat that jolts life into the sheriff's office. Boy found here, Columbia, Mississippi. Stop with traveling handyman. Stop matches description. Bobby Dunbar. Stop. The message is thin as tissue, yet strong enough to hoist the Dunbars from despair. Leslie's knees buckle, not from weakness, but from the sudden, dizzy vertigo of hope. Percy grips the sheriff's desk until his knuckles blanch chalk white. He memorizes train schedules in a single glance. Sheriff Ledoux, sensing the fragile chemistry of miracle and madness, dispatches 2 deputies as escort. Leslie packs Bobby's marbles in a velvet pouch, proof he will recognize. Percy holsters his revolver, not for show but because the world he now believes hides monsters in daylight. At dawn, the 5 a.m. southbound freight hisses like a waking serpent. The Dunbars climb aboard as steel wheels clatter over crosties. Percy studies Cyprus glimpsed between marsh breaks and swears he still hears ripples slapping the shore of Sway's Lake even though they are 50 miles away. Leslie cups her hands against the window. Condensation fogs the glass, sculpting the reflection of a woman she barely recognizes, eyes hollowed by night vigils, yet blazing with a mother's refusal to surrender. The train rounds a bend, pines replace cypress, the swamp falls away, but the silence it taught them follows like an unwanted passenger breathing icily down their collars. For the first time since the stick bobbed alone on that black water, Leslie imagines what comes after rescue, the awkward first hug, Bobby asking why everyone looks so sad, neighbors cheering, the preacher ringing the church bell 13 times for triumph, not mourning. And yet beneath that fragile script beats a darker drum. What if the telegram lies? What if joy is only the lake luring them back for something worse? She buries the fear, brushes Alonzo's hair, and hums nearer, my God, to thee. The hymn is different now, a plea instead of a lullaby. Somewhere in its final verse, Percy reaches for her hand. Their fingers laced tight enough to hurt. Pain, at least, is proof they are still alive, still capable of feeling whatever waits on. The Columbia Station platform, behind them, Sway's Lake glimmers under mid-morning sun, serene as a freshly polished mirror. But if you could dive beneath, you might find silt swirling where no current moves, as though something invisible just stirred, then settled again, guarding a secret so dark that even daylight chooses not to search, and so our descent truly begins. A family in motion, a child in question, and a story whose ending refused to stay buried for nearly a century. Remember this moment, the click of rails, the hush of water memory, the boy's name echoing like a dare, because when the train breaks at Columbia, the Dunbars will discover that sometimes the only thing crueler than losing a child is being told he's been found. Chapter 2, A Stranger with a Child in Mississippi. The southbound freight sighs to a halt in Columbia, Mississippi, on August 31st, 1912, 8 relentless days after Bobby vanished. Steam swirls around the iron wheels, then dissolves into morning heat that smells of pine tar and wet cotton. The depot seems no larger than a good man's barn, yet the crowd waiting on the platform already hums like a hornet nest. Newspapermen in wrinkled suits, townsfolk hoping to witness a miracle, curious drifters sensing the electricity of misfortune. Everyone wants a glimpse of the Dunbars, the parents' tragedy made famous overnight. Percy steps off first, jaw clenched white as chalk, revolver hidden beneath his coat, though sweat darkens the fabric. Leslie follows, clutching Alonzo in one arm and a velvet pouch of Bobby's marbles in the other. For an instant the crowd parts like theater curtains. Every eye fastens to the family, cataloging despair the way collectors appraise rare coins. Sheriff Ledoux's deputies lead them across dusty planks toward the Columbia jail 2 streets over. The boy in question waits there, they say found 3 days earlier when local constable Ray Strickland arrested a tramp named William Cantwell Walters on suspicion of kidnapping. Walters, a rail car repairman with grease under his nails and a harmonica in his pocket, insists the child is his traveling companion Bruce Anderson, the illegitimate son of a woman who loaned him out for work, but in the glow of sensational headlines, no one cares for nuance. A lost boy equals Bobby Dunbar. A drifter equals villain. The script has already been written in bold type. The jailhouse Halwanian side, the jail hallway smells of limewash and cheap tobacco. Gas lamps pop and hiss overhead, casting shadows that bend like crooked elbows against the walls. Constable Strickland tips his hat, then unlocks the cell block's outer gate with a jangling key ring heavy enough to anchor a boat. Best prepare yourselves, he warns. The young one's skittish, Leslie's pulse roars louder than the metal clank. She rehearses what she'll say, "Mama's here, sweetheart," but the words not in her throat. At the end of the corridor, through an iron lattice, she sees a small silhouette perched on a cot, barefoot, hair unevenly shorn, knees drawn to chest. A deputy opens the door. The child flinches, eyes darting like minnows. Leslie steps forward. Bobby. Her voice is feather soft, sinful with hope. The child stares, silent. His irises are the dark slate color of lake water on a stormy dusk, just like Bobby's. Leslie's breath catches. She kneels, fumbling with the pouch, spilling marbles onto the floor, blue, green, swirling glass galaxies that had belonged only to her son. One marble rolls to the boy's foot. He picks it up, holds it to the lamplight, expression unreadable. Percy moves beside his wife. "Son," he whispers, "you know us, don't ya?" Something flickers in the boy's eyes, recognition. Fear? But he remains mute. A tear traces a dirt streak down his cheek. From the adjacent cell, William Walters leans against bars, eyes bloodshot. "I told y'all his name's Bruce. You're scarin' him." His voice rasps, half whiskey, half rage. "Deputy." Collins shoves Walters back, rattling chains. "You hush now. Let the parents talk to their young one." Leslie inches closer. She reaches for the boy's hands, calloused as if he's worked tools too heavy for childhood. When her fingers graze his, he jerks away, clutching the marble. As if it were a talisman to ward off witches, tension thickens the air until even the lamp flames seem to burn slower. Then the boy speaks hoarse, barely audible. "I want to go home." His accent is misshapen, vowels flattened by months of rail yard slang. Leslie sobs, the sound half joy, half terror. Percy's knees buckle. He steadies himself on the doorframe. To them, any voice at all feels like resurrection. The courthouse. Identification: Cobissa mayor, eager for headlines, orders a public viewing at the courthouse the very next morning. Word spreads faster than bootleg liquor. The Dunbars will claim their boy at 10 o'clock sharp. Farmers hitch mules at dawn. Pastors postpone sermons. School children climb pecan trees to peek through open windows. In the courtroom, pew-like benches creak under the congregation's weight. Ceiling fans were ineffectually stirring hot air already heavy with perfume, sweat, and ink from reporters. Notebooks. At the front, the boy sits on a chair too tall for his legs, heels thumping the wood. Beside him, Walters glowers in shackles. Judge R.T. Bateman calls order, though the room is chaos in church clothes. Leslie rises first. The judge asks her to identify the child. She walks a slow gauntlet of gazes, heart hammering a revival rhythm against her ribs. Up close, the boy's features blur into both memory and doubt. Freckles match Bobby's pattern, but his hair seems a shade darker than she recalls. Could sun and grime disguise a crown of golden ash? Traumatic weeks could have scorched color from his scalp, she decides. She notes a faint scar across the left eyebrow, one Bobby received climbing the henhouse gate. It's there, it must be there. She nods, tears welling. This is my son, she declares, voice crackling. The gallery erupts, some cheer, some gasp. Reporters race to telephone booths, feeding coins like gamblers. Yet Julia Anderson, summoned from North Carolina after frantic telegrams, barrels into town that afternoon wearing a calico dress in desperation. She storms the sheriff's office, insisting the child is her own Bruce, lent to Walters when her work at a turpentine camp left no money for a nanny. Newspaper men, smelling bloodier copy, drag her story into print. Another mother arrives. Claims boy is Bruce Andersonite of Tulalabia Sharifledu, fearing a riot, permits Julia a supervised visit that evening. Gas lamps flicker low. The jailhouse corridor echoes with her frantic footfalls. She brings a rag doll stitched from feed sackcloth, its yarn hair matted by sweat of previous embraces. Bruce Bobby eyes widen when he sees her, but recognition is not the same as comfort. He leans back, pressing spine against stone wall. Julia's voice cracks. Bruce, honey, come to mama. The boy shakes his head, whispering, I don't want him to whip me anymore. Everyone assumes he points to Walters, but the gesture is vague, slicing the air rather than a man. Julia bursts into tears. The deputy mistakes pity for proof and records her reaction as hysterical conduct unbecoming of a proper mother. Out in the hallway, Leslie hears the commotion, nails biting into her palm. Percy paces like a panther behind bars of invisible rage. In another corner, William Walters plays a slow dirge on his harmonica, 3 notes rising, 3 notes falling, a lullaby no child can fully trust. Reporters scrawl metaphors, the tune sounded like lost angels weeping into tin. Night deepens, rain starts, drumming the tin roof like thousands of small fists. Somewhere between the patter, Julia hums a lullaby, go to sleep. Little baby, the same tune Leslie once sang at Bobby's. Cradle. 2 women, 1 song, 1 trembling boy. The sound braids through the corridor until even the deputies forget whose sorrow belongs to whom. Walters passed darker corridors while mothers duel with lullabies. Detectives pry into Walters' life. Born in North Carolina, apprenticed as a tinsmith, he wandered rail lines from Texas to Tennessee. Arrest records list drunkenness, vagrancy, never violence. Yet rumors sprout that he traffics children for spare cash, steals them to beg for alms, or worse, feeds them to alligators near New Orleans tourist docks for macabre thrills. None of these tales carry proof, but fear seldom cues for evidence. Under sodium lamp glare, Walters maintains the same story. The boy is Bruce Anderson. His mama gave him to me so he wouldn't starve. He offers Julia's notarized letter of guardianship, now grimy and torn, but the notary's stamp is smudged beyond legibility. The paper joins the pile of ambiguous artifacts, too damning or too exculpatory, depending on desire. Small-town alchemy, rumor into gospel be sunrise. Townsfolk speak of miracles. They say the boy dared whisper mama, mama to Leslie once. The reporters left convenient proof. Church ladies deliver casseroles to the Dunbar's hotel room as if comfort will cement truth. A blacksmith claims he saw the boy smile for the first time in weeks when Leslie touched his cheek. The anecdote grows into legend by breakfast, growing feathers of absolute certainty. Julia, meanwhile, is labeled loose by polite society. She bore several children out of wedlock, they hiss. She cannot even name Bruce's father, reporters sketch her as shifty, unkempt, borderline illiterate, though her penmanship in letters home later proves otherwise, but scandal sells. Virtue is revised to fit the headline, a test of scars and songs. Judge Bateman, cornered by competing claims, demands Physical proof, unique scars, birthmarks. Leslie points to the healed cut across the brow, to a small crescent on the left big toe from a dropped butter knife. Perfect matches, she swears. Julia counters that Bruce burned his index finger on a kettle. The boy indeed bears that oval patch. The gallery gasps, every mark double-edged, evidence serving whichever narrative shouts louder. Frustration peaks when the judge orders an informal recognition test in the courthouse yard. Each woman stands 20 paces apart. The boy, blindfold removed, chooses who he walks to. Leslie grips her skirt so hard seems moan. Julia clasps the rag doll, tears streaking dusty cheeks. Deputies remove the blindfold. The boy scans pupils, huge pools of panic. He steps, then stops, foot hovering over packed earth. Silence gongs through the crowd. Sweat stings his eyes. He staggers sideways, half toward Leslie, then veers to Julia, then freezes again like a compass needle trapped between norths. The judge, unwilling to torture further, ends the test. Reporters scribble, boy too frightened to choose another. Headline for tomorrow. Decision day. Public sentiment, however, tilts decidedly Dunbar. They are respectable, church-going, photogenic in grief. Julia is other, Walters is worse. When testimony concludes on September 4th, Judge Bateman rules that the child is Bobby Dunbar. Walters is indicted for kidnapping. Julia is advised to go home and pray for forgiveness for what no one specifies. Leslie collapses into her husband's arms as the gallery cheers. Reporters race for telegraph offices again. Bobby Dunbar found alive. Real story ends in joyous claim, yet outside the sky crackles with a heat lightning that never quite becomes rain. Julia Anderson slumps on the courthouse steps, cradling the rag doll, her sobs drowned by town band trumpets playing Bringing Home Baby. She weeps until the melody ends, then long after, because a song, unlike a verdict, cannot rewrite blood. Night. Train back to Louisiana that evening. The Dunbars board a passenger car for home. The boy Bobby, now in every mouth, sits between Percy and Leslie, wearing clothes donated by sympathetic townswomen. The fabric smells of starch and unfamiliar perfume. He turns the marbles over in his pocket. There clink a muffled Morse code nun candy crypt. Leslie strokes his hair. He stiffens, then allows it. Percy studies the child's face in lamplight. The curvature of nose, the slope of chin, they match memory if he stares long enough. So he keeps staring. Behind them, William Walters is hauled away in manacles, harmonica confiscated as potential contraband. Julia boards a separate coach back to North Carolina. Dull lap, reputation in ruins. Neither mother sleeps. Neither boy Bobby or Bruce speaks above a whisper. Outside, cypress swamp returns, dark and bottomless. Somewhere in that labyrinth sways lake, drinks starlight, and remembers. It knows what the train passengers try to forget, the difference between a name spoken by law and a soul called by blood. The wheels click-clack, a lullaby none of them trusts. He is yours, he is yours, he is yours. But the cadence falters, skipping beats, hinting at a truth the rails themselves cannot iron flat, and so the child rides toward a life already mapped by strangers, while a shadowed question coiled deep in his marrow curls tighter. What if I belong? To the woman left crying on the courthouse steps, the train whistle howls, part warning, part elegy, and the dark Mississippi pines whip by like silent jurors turning their backs. Chapter 3. Two mothers, one son. Night releases the train at Opelousas on September 5, 1912, and the station platform erupts like a carnival forced into Sunday clothes. A brass band belts when the saints go marching in. Church ladies wave lace fans, calling praise louder than hymnals. Boys scramble onto luggage trunks for a glimpse of the miracle child. Lantern light dapples the crowd, turning faces into flickering saints and gargoyles. Sheriff Ledoux ushers the Dunbars down the steps. Leslie clutches the boy, her Bobby, so tightly he can hardly breathe. Yet the instant they cross the threshold into familiar dust, something odd happens. The child does not look relieved. He looks lost, head pivoting as if comparing this welcome to a memory that doesn't quite match. Homecoming built on cracked foundations, the Dunbar house glows with kerosene lanterns in every window. Neighbors have swept the porch, polished the pewter door knocker, strung cotton bunting from the eaves. Inside, Percy's sisters laid Bobby's toys in precise semicircles, even the wooden top whose paint he'd chipped 2 summers prior on the kitchen table, a coconut cake, a peach pie, a Bible open to the parable of the prodigal son. But ceremonies cannot instruct hearts how to beat in new rhythms. When Leslie kneels, arms wide, Bobby hesitates before stepping inside. He flinches at familiar corners, as if rooms have shifted while he was away. In the nursery, he studies his own pillow like foreign terrain. That night, Percy finds him curled beneath the bed instead of upon it, fingering the marbles in sweating palms. Opelousas Morning Edition Truth for sale be done, newspapers churn out gospel, Bobby Dunbar home at last. Real story of miraculous return. Reporters salvage every scrap of sentiment, ignoring stray threads of doubt. Leslie obliges interviews, voice trembling yet resolute, until one journalist tasks Bobby his favorite fishing spot on Sway's Lake. The boy's gaze slides blank. He shrugs. Leslie interjects that trauma muddies memory. The reporter politely nods, pen scratching skepticism across thin newsprint, across state lines. Rival papers champion Julia Anderson. Mother denied. Blares the Raleigh Herald. Photographs depict her thin, resolute face beside a caption. She knows her boy by heart, scar by scar. The public devours this feud the way coyote snawbones choosing marrow that matches their prejudices. Whispers inside the parlor. Walsopoloosis baptizes the child in curiosity. At church, old Mrs. Gremillion pinches his cheek and whispers, "Remember me, sugar?" When he does not, she murmurs a doubtful tsk behind her hymnal. Children on the playground dare him to recite his ABCs. He fumbles letters after K, claiming he never learned the rest. "Course you did," they retort. Bobby could spell his own name before he was 4. Even Percy's mother, who once rocked Bobby through croup, studies the boy at dinner, spoon hovering mid-air. She notices he favors his left hand now, though Bobby had been right dominant. Leslie snaps that injuries change habits. Her mother-in-law bows to silence, but the doubt hangs like humidity in August. A tea night. The house absorbs a knees. Floorboards creak beneath unseen weight. A rocking chair sways though windows are shut. Leslie jolts awake to find the boy sleepwalking, whispering mama into dark hallways, but the vowel sounds wrong, drawn long like mama, not mama the way Bobby used to say before the lake. Julia's crusade. While Opelousas tries to bless its paradox, Julia Anderson wages a campaign of one. She rides county buses and cotton wagons, spreading her testimony. Bruce was born in 1908 at Ellerby Farm. He broke his finger chasing a pig. He hates molasses but loves sorghum syrup. She offers affidavits from turpentine camp nurses who wiped his fevered brow. Yet for every signature she gathers, a new rumor sprouts, that she sold her child for whiskey, that she steals offerings from church plates, that she communes with spirits under moonlit pines. She writes to the Times-Picayune, "If truth has eyes, let it see us both, mother and child, in daylight free from men's judgments." The editor prints only half the letter, trimming lines that complicate the tidy hero-mother narrative already adored in Louisiana. Julia's voice becomes spectral, heard but never allowed to haunt the final draft. Doctors, lawyers, and the science of conviction. Sheriff Ledoux, uneasy under the microscope of competing headlines, convenes 3 local physicians to examine Bobby. They note a distinct scar on his left big toe, a surgical-looking notch on the ear. Leslie swears both injuries are Bobby's. Julia's affidavits claim the same for Bruce. The doctors deliberate long into the night, then publish a cautious conclusion. Findings are consistent with either child, impossible to determine definitively, publicly. This means nothing. People believe what they need. Privately, Percy paces the porch until dawn, replaying every memory. Bobby chasing fireflies, Bobby mispronouncing crawfish as clawfish, Bobby kissing his father's whiskered cheek goodnight. He shakes those recollections like a man trying to rattle coins from a locked box. Something in them refuses to jingle right. Echoes from the Lakeon humid afternoon. Percy takes the boy fishing at Sway's Lake, hoping a sensory jolt will unlock recognition. They sit in the canoe's quiet belly, water lapping wood with slow, syrupy slaps. Percy teaches knots Bobby once knew by heart. The boy's fingers struggle, producing sloppy loops that collapse under tension. A turtle surfaces, head the color of tarnished pewter. The child recoils as if expecting the shell to sprout teeth. Percy forces a smile, lowers bait into water dark as half-remembered dreams. Minutes stretch, dragonflies flicker green sparks across the canoe's rim, and then the boy begins to sob, shoulders rattling. "I don't belong here," he repeats between gasps. The lake absorbs the confession, ripples sliding outward like the consequence of a pebble dropped in guilt. Percy pulls him close but finds no words sturdy enough. The cypress knees stand silent jurors to the scene. Town gossip turns Venomouseby. October, dissension bleeds through polite fauds. At the general store, customers whisper that the Dunbars keep the child indoors too often, proof he's not theirs. In church, women scrutinize how Leslie braids his hair too tight, disguising curls Bruce used to wear. A schoolteacher claims he can't recall Opelousas street names. A gossip columnist transforms this into Bobby suffers amnesia from kidnap. Trauma at Percy's workplace, a mill foreman jokes that the kid might be a Yankee spy. Nobody laughs. Humor becomes brittle in rooms crowded with doubt. Percy writes to a New Orleans attorney about suing for libel. The lawyer replies that public intrigue cannot be litigated. Wait it out, he advises, but waiting invites rot. Silence is a petri dish where rumor cultures multiply. Ghosts in the hallway, Mirorani clawing midnight. Leslie wakes to a soft creak. She tiptoes to the hallway and finds Bobby standing before the gilt mirror, candle in hand. His reflection trembles. In amber light, he studies his face with scientific scrutiny, tilts his head left, then right, fingers the scar above his brow as though measuring familiarity. Leslie's breath halts. "Sweetheart," she whispers. He does not jump. He turns slowly, eyes molten. With a sadness too seasoned for 4 summers on earth, no, 5 now, if he is Bobby. Candle wax drips onto his knuckles, but he doesn't flinch. "Why can't I remember the song you sang?" he asks, as if remembering were the price of belonging. Leslie folds him into her nightgown, humming nearer. "My God, to thee." He hums along gamely, but off-key, rhythm unraveling like a mismatched heartbeat. She decides memory is not proof of blood. Love must be. Still, dawn finds her at the kitchen table copying the lyrics onto paper, as though words pinned to ink might anchor the boy to her through verses. Julia's last gambit far away. Julia secures help from a lawyer funded by a crusading journalist. They petition Louisiana's Supreme Court for appeal, citing questionable procedures, bias, and medical ambiguity. The writ reaches Opelousas on December 8, 1912, like a cold wind through shutters already rattling. A new hearing is ordered in Opelousas Parish Courthouse. The People v. William Walters with identity again the axis. Christmas decorations go up even as legal briefs arrive. Holly wreaths hang above flyers depicting Walter's face beside the bold promise, kidnapper to answer for crime. Choirs rehearse carols across town squares where children pretend to be shepherds who never lose their lambs. Meanwhile, 2 real mothers sharpen testimonies like knives, preparing to slice doubt into something the court can swallow. Familial fracture as in the Dunbar house, tension fractures plaster seams. Percy and Leslie argue in whispers that swell too. Shouts, "He is ours, but why won't he answer to his own name after dark? Stop it. That's fear talking, fear or truth. Which would you rather ignore?" Bobby or Bruce lurks behind doors, hearing syllables meant to be muffled. He teaches Alonzo a railroad lullaby Walters once hummed, but when Alonzo sings it in the parlor, Leslie bans the tune as blasphemy. Alonzo cries. Bobby retreats beneath the bed frame again, marbles clicking like bones. That night, the rocking chair moves on its own for the third time. Leslie sprinkles holy water along windowsills. Percy oil treats the rocking runners, blaming warped wood, though he too heard the silent push of empty air. They never speak of the chair afterward, yet both notice the rocking ceases only when Bobby stands in the doorway watching it. Toward the courtroom of shadow, Sinterfog lowers over Opelousas as the trial date looms. Crows roost on courthouse spires, their silhouettes black punctuation against milk-white sky. Leslie stitches a new suit for Bobby, navy wool, brass buttons, a sailor collar, as if sewing nostalgia might conjure the boy she remembers. Percy rehearses testimony alone in the barn, voice echoing against hay bale walls. Across the river, Julia arrives in a borrowed coat, her lawyer carrying affidavits thick as hymnals. Walters is transferred from Angola prison, wrists chained, face gaunt but eyes fierce. Reporters file into local hotels, sharpening pencils. The stage resets for Act Two of a tragedy that refuses to choose a villain cleanly, and in the Dunbar attic, a gilt mirror silently records dust swirling, tiny constellations of doubt glinting whenever lamplight dares to climb the stairs. The boy, whichever boy he is, sometimes stares at that dusty universe, wondering if one of those motes is the real version of himself, spinning just beyond reach. The gavel will soon sound. Truth and fear will duel beneath chandeliers. Jurors will weigh evidence heavier than any of them can lift without breaking, and while adults argue whose child he is, the boy lies awake asking a simpler horror: what if I belong to no one now? Chapter 4. Courtroom of Shadows. January snow is rare in southern Louisiana, but January 13th, 1913 dawns with a pale dusting that hushes Opelousas the way a librarian silences rowdy patrons. Frost on live oak leaves gleams like dull pewter, and every breath blooms a ghost in the chilled air. This is the day truth is supposed to clock in, raise its right hand, and swear to stay honest, but truth seems to have overslept. The parish courthouse looms Roman colonnaded and self-important, but winter light makes its granite skin sallow, like an aging actor caught without makeup. Inside, rows of oak benches groan under the collective weight of curiosity. Farmers in wool coats smelling of horse liniment, ladies fanning programs more for nerves than for heat, scribbling reporters, and a knot of children allowed the day off school for educational purposes. Education in this instance is knowing how rumors coagulate into verdicts. A bailiff with a walrus mustache calls, "All rise." The crowd scuffles up, hats rustle, scarves drift 2 floors already, muddy with melted frost. Judge Edward Taswell Guillory presides, widower, former Confederate drummer boy, a man whose stern profile appears carved by the same chisel that shaped the courthouse pillars. His gavel cracks twice. It sounds like a rifle shot aimed at silence. Specters. In human form, William Cantwell Walters shuffles in first, shackles snicking like metallic insects, gaunt from 5 months at Angola prison. His cheeks cave in beneath overgrown stubble, yet his eyes iron or gray burn with an animal insistence. "I'm no thief." On his sleeve, a patch of prison denim has been hastily stitched where a guard dripped away loose threads. The tear resembles a jagged mouth trying to swallow the courtroom whole. Next, Julia Anderson enters, chin lifted, calico dress too thin for January but pressed crisp as defiance. Her lawyer, Vernal Browder, shepherds her to the plaintiffs. "Pew," murmurs float, "that's the Carolina woman." She feels each syllable like hailstones, but she never looks down. Finally, the Dunbar family arrives, Percy in a black suit that smells of mothballs and worry. Lessian gloves hiding nail-bitten fingertips, and the boy dandied in the navy suit she stitched, brass buttons glinting as they pass the press row. Camera shutters snap a rapid-fire autopsy of their composure. The child startles at each flash, blinking as if lightning invaded the room. Lessie squeezes his hand, whispering, "We're nearly home now." Opening salvus, District Attorney Silas Cordier, a tall man with a preacher's cadence, rises. "First, gentlemen of the jury," he begins, "we convene not merely to punish a kidnapper, but to defend the sacred bond between parent and child, an American covenant older than this state itself." He paints Walters as a drifter peddling stolen children the way others hawk pocket watches. His words thud like stones dropped in a well. Each accusation ripples wider than the last. Defense attorney Josiah Pritchard counters, calling Walters a simple tinker, guilty only of compassion for a boy abandoned by circumstances. He brands the prosecution's tale, swamp smoke shaped into demons. Then he drops a subtle grenade. If identity is so certain, why has the child not uttered one spontaneous memory of Dunbar life? The gallery inhales as one organism. Someone's corset creaks, witnesses under gas lamp glare. Dunbar testifies. First, gas sconces hiss overhead, their light pooling in her eyes so that tears shimmer before they fall. She recounts the scar on Bobby's brow, the chipped top tooth, how he once mispronounced alligator as alligator. Each anecdote is a prayer disguised as data. Cordier nods paternally. Jurors dab handkerchiefs at noses suddenly runny, but Pritchard's cross-examination is a slow, surgical bleed. "Mrs. Dunbar, can you state with certainty that trauma could not erase a child's accent?" "And no, sir, and yet you base identity partly on how he once said alligator. Might not another toddler utter the same mistake?" Lessie wavers. The gallery's sympathy shifts, a school of fish darting from shadow to shadow. Percy. Dunbar follows, voice gravelly. Cross-examined, he admits the boy now uses his left hand, contrary to childhood habit. He tries to explain he might have injured the right on the road, but the doubt lands. Then Julia takes the stand. Her voice is soft but steady, each sentence a quilting stitch laced with heartbreak. Bruce's birth at Ellerby Farm, the scar from scalding kettle water, his fondness for cane syrup taffy. She produces letters from Reverend Hines of the Turpentine Camp. The prosecution objects hearsay, but the judge allows limited reading. The words drift over the jury like incense. Julia Anderson is a woman of moral effort, if not always moral fortune. Cordier tries to shred her credibility. "Miss Anderson, how many children have you borne out of wedlock?" "3, she answers, each numeral weighted with shame yet held steady. "And is it true you permitted Mr. Walters to take Bruce without legal guardianship? He asked to earn wages repairing pirogues along the Pearl River. I believed him." The courtroom bristles. Trusting a drifter with your child is a sin scribbled nowhere in scripture, yet preached from every porch rocker. The scar exhibition with theatrics worthy of vaudeville. Cordier requests the boy step before the jury. Lessie guides him beneath the rail, palms trembling against his shoulders. Cordier lifts a pointer. "Notice, gentlemen, the crescent scar on the eyebrow, Mrs. Dunbar." "That's when he fell off the henhouse," she says. Pritchard interjects. "Bruce earned that scar when a goat butted him at Ellerby Farm. Testimony from Nurse Lovelady, Your Honor." The jurors peer so close their breath fogs the child's hair. The boy looks at no one, only at the floor, marbles bulging in his pocket like trapped planets. Cordier next displays phonograph records of Bobby's early babble. Percy had recorded them on a friend's Edison cylinder. The scratchy playback fills the courtroom with ghost tin laughter. "Daddy, look at da big frog." The child on record lisped certain consonants. Cordier commands courtroom Bobby to repeat the phrase. He obliges. The consonants fall differently, sharper. As if shaped by another teacher, Cordier's eyebrows arch in triumph. Lessie's fingers strangle her handkerchief into a twist of linen agony. Expert of dubious science, Seprosekin's final witness is Dr. Augustine, a phrenologist whose walnut case of calipers and diagrams lends him an aura of scholarship. He palpates the boy's skull, declaring cranial index identical to Dunbar lineage. The defense counters with laughter. Phrenology, they claim, is carnival bunk, yet half the jury nods, comforted by measurements promising certainty. Where conscience flounders, jury sequestered in Dryad arguments conclude near midnight, gas lamps sputtering low, casting the room in jittery chiaroscuro. Judge Guillory instructs, weigh the testimonies, not the gossip, and remember the liberty of a man and the fate of a child rest upon your honor. 12 men file into deliberation, door bolting behind them. The gallery exhales, benches popping as people stand, joints creaking louder than floorboards. Hours grind. Reporters smoke on the courthouse steps, type slugs of half-finished leads. Lessie prays in a side chapel, knuckles white around rosary beads. Julia sits in the hallway, thumb rubbing the rag doll's stitched face raw. Walters stretches chain-bound wrists, whispering to no one, I ain't no monster. The boy sleeps across 2 chairs, coat for blanket, marbles clutched like an antidote. Verdict by sunrise yet for 17 a.m. The jury returns, frost spiders across the courtroom windows. Outside, roosters are still negotiating dawn. The foreman clears, his throat paper shaking. We, the jury, find the defendant, William Cantwell Walters, guilty of kidnapping Robert Clarence Dunbar and recommend life at hard labor. The gavel pounds. Lessie collapses, relief or shock. Into Percy's arms. Walters howls a protest that ricochets off marble walls. Julia gasps, pressing doll to sternum as though it might keep her heart from falling out. Courtier's lips purse in satisfied benediction. Pritchard slams his briefcase, eyes blazing at a justice system he now deems conjured from smoke. The child declared Bobby once and for all wakes at the gavel's crack. He looks around, confusion clouding his face. In that instant, silence descends so completely the hiss of gas lamps sounds like ocean surf. His voice slices the hush. Which house do we go to now? No one answers. There is no sentence short enough, no paragraph polite enough to explain the machinery that has just stamped his identity into law. Aftershocks, Walters is hauled to Angola to begin life labor in sugar cane fields. Reporters file triumphalist headlines. Editorials hail mother's love-conquering villainy, yet beneath the jubilation doubts slither. A juror in the barber shop mutters Walters never looked cunning enough. A parish clerk wonders why Bobby still left-hands his spoon. A seamstress swears the boy shrinks from Lessie's embraces at dusk, as if darkness subtracts familiarity. Julia appeals, but funds dwindle. Her lawyer withdraws. She returns to North Carolina, carrying grief heavy as wet burlap. She pins bruises. Baby shoes above the fireplace, vowing they will never collect dust. She will wipe them weekly so memory stays polished. Years later, visitors swear they sometimes hear tiny footsteps upstairs, though the attic remains empty. The boy behind the verdict back in Opelousas, life tries to rein it. Percy takes Bobby to church where congregants congratulate miracle. With handshakes that last too long, Lessie coaxes him through arithmetic lessons he should remember. He muddles numbers, wiping tears when she sighs. At night he still crawls beneath the bed. And once, during a thunderstorm, Percy finds him rocking the attic chair himself, humming a harmonica lullaby he claims not to know. The Dunbars decide to move to New Orleans, hoping distance will mute gossip. They pack trunks, cover mirrors, and sell the canoe in which Percy tried to fish memories from water that never forgets. On moving day, Lessie discovers the marbles scattered exactly where Bobby had sheltered under the bed, the pouch empty. She gathers them, noticing one she's never seen. Smoky quartz glass, not cobalt. Had Bruce owned such a marble? She cannot recall. She pockets it anyway, tucking uncertainty beside motherly conviction. As the train steams south, Bobby presses his forehead to the window, watching Opelousas recede. His reflection overlays the passing fields, a faint ghost superimposed on cotton. Rose, he whispers, "Goodbye, Bruce," so softly even he isn't sure which syllable is farewell and which is greeting. Meanwhile, the swamp keeps scoria its ways lake. Winter fog skims the surface, thin as worn silk. Fishermen swear they sometimes see a child's shape waiting at dawn, but when they call out, reeds only rustle, and the lake yawns wider as if stretching in its sleep. Water records everything, even secrets sworn in courtrooms. It files them in mud archives until science, decades later, will come reading with test tubes instead of testimonies. For now, the verdict stands: Bobby Dunbar, son of Leslie and Percy, lives. William Walters labors behind razor wire. Julia Anderson mourns. The newspapers close the book. But somewhere in that book, a chapter unprinted hums like a hidden verse, and the boy who has learned to answer to two names begins writing. Silence into new pages none of them see. Chapter 5. Years of silence. Trains whistle different in New Orleans, long, mournful ascents that sound like street corner prophets begging heaven to pay attention. On March 1st, 1913, one such whistle delivers the renamed Dunbar family to a shotgun house on Dauphine Street, 3 blocks from the river where paddle wheelers cough black smoke into humid dawns. New city, new school, new church, all engineered to smother rumor under the clamor of a metropolis, yet rumor travels light. It squeezes between cobblestones, clings to hems, rides the humidity north like mildew. Leslie scrubs the clapboard walls with lye until her hands blister, insisting the stench of Angola prison still lingers in the corners. Percy finds work tallying freight at the river docks, his ledger neat, his thoughts tangled. Alonzo, now 4, adopts the city's sing-song accent and forgets the lake monsters of Opelousas. And Bobby, still 2 names folded into one boy, starts first grade at St. Anthony's parochial school wearing a second-hand blazer and a hesitation no tailor can mend. A classroom of mirror. Sister Marguerite believes every child is a psalm waiting to be sung. She keeps a phonograph in the corner where Edison's trumpet barely outshouts passing streetcars. She asks each pupil to write their full birth name on slates the first week. Chalk squeaks as children inscribe Florence, Antoine, Lucille, Bobby. Pauses, hand trembling. For a moment the slate is an abyss reflecting both Bobby Dunbar and Bruce Anderson. Finally he writes Robert C. Dunbar in letters too neat, as if copying from someone else's desk. Recess proves harsher. Older boys circle him, curious about his faint Carolina twang, calling him Swamp Swap. One afternoon they yank the sailor collar Leslie insisted he still wear on Sundays. The fabric rips, brass button rolling into a gutter. Bobby does not. Fight, he freezes, memory flickering of a different collar, a different woman sewing. Sister Marguerite intervenes, citing the Gospel of Matthew. Blessed are the peacemakers, but playground kingdoms prefer Rome's law. Strength crowns itself. T home. Leslie stitches the tear but questions why the thread unravels again by morning. Percy breaks up the mended fabric with exhaustion, rough fingers. He'll grow out of sailor suits soon, he mutters, already seeing a dilemma uniform cannot shield. A city of masks, New Orleans thrives on reinvention. Every Lent promises resurrection after Mardi Gras sin, yet for Bobby, carnival masks mirror his own life, painted smiles hiding sameness within. He collects beads thrown from Spanish Plaza balconies, marveling that each strand gleams identical yet claims a different hue under gaslight. At night he strings them above his bed, a rosary not to God but to possibilities. What if every bead is another self he might choose? Leslie prays harder. She fasts, lights novenas, knits guilt into every silent breath. If faith can move mountains, surely it can move confusion from a child's heart. She teaches Bobby to kneel beside her, reciting Hail Mary until the syllables taste mechanical. Do you remember saying these before the lake? She asks. He shrugs. She answers for him. Yes, of course, letters never posted across state lines. Julia Anderson composes weekly letters to my darling Bruce, recounting North Carolina harvests. The smell of turpentine pines, how his siblings ask for him. She stacks letters in a pine box under her bed. Postage costs what her wages cannot spare, and besides, what address would recognize Bruce? She thinks of Walter's crushing sugar cane in Angola sun, fingerprints whittled into bloodied ribbons, and she curses the verdict with psalms twisted to lament the war years 191 for drags Europe into madness. By 1917, America drafts sons and spreads. Posters of Uncle Sam pointing like an accusation. Percy, too old, works double shifts loading troop ships. Leslie and parish women roll bandages in church basements. Bobby, now 10, sells war stamps on street corners, yelling slogans he barely understands. People praise his patriotism, but he shoves coins deep into pockets as if they might morph into marbles, his secret comfort still hidden in a tin cocoa tin beneath his mattress. One humid July night, thunder rattles shutters loose. The rocking chair in their parlor, shipped from Opelousas, despite Percy's wish to burn it, begins its slow, patient sway without a push. Bobby creeps downstairs, places his marbles on the seat, and watches them dance in slow circles with each rock. Leslie finds him there at dawn, asleep, head against the wooden armrest. She gathers the marbles, notices the smoky quartz sphere again, the impostor among cobalt. In a flash of rage, she hurls it into the gutter outside, but 2 days later Bobby produces it, claiming he found it in his shoe. Adolescence. A geography of secrets. B14. Bobby towers past classmates, shoulders broad from lugging sugar sacks. After school, his voice cracks in 2 unfamiliar registers. One afternoon, Sister Margarita signs an essay. Describe your earliest memory. Students write about tooth fairies, storm nights, lost puppies. Bobby's page stays blank until ink period. Bleeds like an ulcer. Finally he scrawls, I remember a train always moving, nothing more. He earns a D- for brevity. Sister marks the margin, dig deeper, but the boy cannot unearth what isn't buried where everyone says. Sporting scouts notice his strength. Loyola High invites him to try out for baseball. Percy beams, sees college in his swing. Yet the first time Bobby steps onto the diamond, the crack of bat on ball reverberates like a prison gate. Crowds roar. He freezes, hearing harmonical lullabies twisting in the echo. He strikes out 3 at-bats, quits the team that evening. That night Leslie pleads, why do you sabotage blessings? His only answer, what if they're not meant for me? The echo chamber of adulthood 1920 brings prohibition and jazz. Bobby, 18, haunts Storyville's remnants, drawn to cornet riffs winding through alleys. Musician friends call him Quiet Bob. Between sets they swap family stories. Someone requests his mother's maiden name for a liquor ring ledger. He stammers, picks any last name but Dunbar, then flees before realizing he gave Julia's surname, Anderson. Guilt dimples his conscience. He buys magnolia flowers on Canal Street, presents them to Leslie. She smiles too wide, tears lingering like dew. They never speak of the forgotten surname. Percy's confessionth year, 1922, plows tragedy. Percy collapses at the docks, heart clenched. Tighter than payroll balances he tallied. On his deathbed he summons Bobby alone. Kerosene lamp flickers, casting cage-like bars across sheets. Percy's whisper rasps, son, sometimes truth is what we protect, not what we prove. He presses a key into Bobby's palm, rusted, ornate, Opelousas bank box. Use it only when ghosts keep you awake. Hours later, Percy exhales a final ledger line. At the funeral, mourners recite eulogies about a father's surety, yet Bobby stands by the casket feeling numbers shift beneath skin, age, name, lineage, subtotals, refusing to reconcile the lockbox weeks. Afterward, Bobby rides the Southern Pacific North, arriving in Opelousas under a veil of dusk. The town seems shrunken, storefronts sagging like tired eyelids. He rents a room above the butcher and retrieves the box, he trembling inside. Percy's journal, water-smudged maps of Sway's Lake grids, and a clipping dated 191 for Walters granted. Retrial appeal. Charges dropped for lack of evidence. Bobby reads the article twice. Walters freed, case dissolved, identity no longer contested by law. Nobody told him. Beneath the clipping lies a single marble, smoky quartz twin to the one he guards. A note in Percy's script, for when stories need weight. Bobby pockets both marbles, suddenly heavier than ledgers. That night he walks to the lake. Moonlight webs through cypress branches. He kneels where reeds once concealed panic and drops the twin marbles into the water. Concentric rings travel outward. Within each ring he sees two faces, one carved by memory, one by rumor spreading until they merge indistinguishable. He waits for the lake to answer. Only frogs reply. He returns to the room, sleep a stranger. Marriage and muted joy 1924. Bobby marries Helena Dupper, a baker's daughter whose laughter smells of lemon zest. They settle in Abita Springs, raising 3 children, Margaret, Charlene, and little Bobby. JRB Lessie moves in, gray now, spooning love into gumbo that tastes of apology. She never calls her grandson Bruce, never tells Helena why Bobby bolts. Upright whenever harmonica drifts from neighbor porches. During the Great Depression, Bobby works civilian conservation corps camps, felling pines with silent fury. Fellow lumberjacks nickname him to name after finding Bia carved on his canteen below our CD. He laughs it off, but that night he files the canteen smooth, erasing letters until only blanked in reflects fireside sparks. Dreams that don't forget winter 1930. Influenza claims Sister Marguerite. In her will she bequeaths Bobby a phonograph cylinder he once recorded in first grade, his voice reciting Psalm 23 with uncertain cadence. Adult Bobby plays it in his shed. The child's voice wavers. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. The adult weeps because mercy has followed. Yes, but like a shadow always one step behind. He stores the cylinder beside Percy's journal, 2 ghosts singing harmony. Lessie's reckoning 1932 on her deathbed. Lessie beckons Bobby close, voice papery thin. No mother is perfect, she confesses, but love is. She offers a locket, inside a faded photo of toddler Bobby or Bruce, and a clipping about Julia's failed final appeal. Forgive me my certainty, Lessie whispers, then slips away before explaining which certainty begs forgiveness. Bobby kisses her forehead, tasting both salt and surrender. A family that hums 2 notes, life limps forward. Bobby teaches his children. Fishing knots left-handed ones. He refuses to sing lullabies. Helena hums instead. When his daughters ask about their heritage for school projects, he tells them Scottish roots, though genealogy books show none. He buys them marbles, always blue glass, never smoky quartz. Yet nights find him at the porch rail, fingering the lone quartz sphere, rolling possibility between thumb and forefinger like a rosary of doubt. In 1948, when television flickers in 2 American living rooms, a crime program airs a segment on the famous Dunbar kidnapping. Bobby changes the channel, heart jackhammering. His eldest, Margaret, glimpses a grainy photo of a boy in a sailor suit. Daddy, is that you? Bobby studies the screen. The child stares back with eyes both familiar and foreign. He answers, "That's a long story for another night." The television hums static, but the house hums question. Seeds for the future be the 1950s. Science whispers new promises, blood typing. Then talk of something called DNA, invisible threads linking ancestors whether they like it or not. Bobby reads popular mechanics articles by porchlight, a chill under the Louisiana stars. What he hides none must exhume. Yet he hears the wind through pines chanting one day, one day. He visits a jeweler, commissions 2 identical smoky quartz, marbles encased in silver cages. He gives one to Margaret on her wedding day for luck, he claims. The second he buries beneath an oak at Sway's Lake during a solitary pilgrimage, as if planting a question for time itself to answer. Years pass. Grandchildren swarm, each calling him Papa Bobby, their love uncomplicated. Still, sometimes at dusk they find him staring into the middle distance, humming a tune no one recognizes, 3 notes rising, 3 notes falling like a harmonica. Lullaby without instrument or origin, the decades knit quiet around him, but quiet is not forgetfulness. It is a womb where truth gestates, waiting for midwives with microscopes, and somewhere in a North Carolina attic, Julia Anderson's letters yellow but do not decay. Each envelope unopened still breathes my darling Bruce, ready for a century. To crack its seal, for Bobby, nights thicken with a new noise, the distant buzz of future laboratories preparing reagents. He does not know words like polymerase chain reaction, yet he senses them the way an old dog senses storms. He keeps the last smoky quartz marble in his pocket even at church, as if fearing judgment strong enough to strip names away. One afternoon in 1966, he stands before a mirror his daughter hung in the foyer. Age has carved gullies beside his mouth, yet he still traces the faint scar above his eyebrow. He whispers Bobby, then Bruce, testing which syllable the wrinkles prefer. The mirror, impartial, ancient glass, whispers nothing back, but the world outside begins to murmur of genetic codes and the possibility that bones, blood, saliva can testify beyond courtroom gaslights. The silence Bobby has cultivated for 54 years begins to pulse, alive like a distant drum carried on river fog. He feels it in marrow that might belong to one mother's tears or another's lullaby. He pockets the marble again, steps onto the porch, and rocks in the chair that followed him since the lake. With each creak he imagines approaching footsteps, scientists wearing gloves instead of gossip, holding swabs instead of verdicts. He rocks faster, as if he might outpace modernity, but progress never tires, and truth, once starved, arrives. Ravenous, the years of silence are almost spent. Soon a cheek swab will speak louder than gavel or hymn, and the echoes of Sway's Lake will reverberate through double helixes. Bobby closes his eyes, surrendering to dusk's chorus of cicadas, and wonders if tomorrow's dawn will address him by the name printed on his birth certificate or the one stamped by a century of doubt. Chapter 6, The DNA Resurrection. Some graves are dug in dirt, others in paperwork. For almost 90 years the Bobby Dunbar story lay buried beneath clippings, court transcripts, and the stubborn hush of a family that wanted calm more than clarity. But paper decays, ink fades, and silence eventually coughs up an echo. That echo took the shape of a granddaughter with the stubbornness of a river current and the curiosity of the same boy who once twirled a willow stick at Sway's Lake. Margaret Dunbar Cutright grew up hearing the legend like a bedtime cautionary tale. At holiday tables her father, Bob J.R.B., recited it with a mixture of pride and unease. Kidnapped at 4, found at 5, courtroom drama, villain punished, miracle achieved. Guests applauded. Dessert arrived. Subject closed. Yet Margaret noticed the small flinch in her grandfather's eyes whenever harmonica music drifted from a radio, the way he rolled a cloudy marble between thumb and forefinger during quiet moments. By the mid-1990s she was 32, married, and the internet had begun scattering archives across glowing screens. She typed Bobby Dunbar true story into a primitive search engine and discovered contradictions the family scrapbook had never shown. Newspapers praising Julia Anderson's moral conviction, appeals mentioning evidence suppressed, Walter's release. After one hung jury and the state's reluctant dismissal, the narrative kept shape-shifting like a reflection in rippling water. Margaret felt the old-itch children feel when dared not to look under the bed. Vaults of Memorish traveled to Opelousas in 1997, slipping into the courthouse basement where cardboard boxes slept under sagging fluorescent bulbs. Dust motes drifted like tiny galaxies around her flashlight beam. She uncoiled brittle microfilm, turning cranks until ghostly headlines projected on a wall. Two mothers claim same son. The photographs glowed negative white Leslie's tear-streaked face beside Julia's defiant profile. Margaret scribbled. Notes, each sentence a crack in the family's marble FA.T. The parish library she unearthed Reverend Heinz's letter praising Julia's devotion. At the state archive she located Walter's prison records, entries noting that inmate maintains innocence, displays model behavior, facts multiplied until they pressed against her ribs like invasive vines. Back in Abita Springs, she confronted her father with photocopies. Bob JRB winced as if paper edges could cut. That was all sorted when I was a kid, honey, he muttered. No use plowing old ground. But Margaret saw moisture rim his eyes the way truth invites both thirst and dread. A century-old humth. Late 1990s brought whispers of a new miracle. DNA, newspapers touted cold case exonerations, scientists in white coats coaxing secrets from skeletal teeth, television dramatized cotton swabs transforming doubt into certainty. Margaret's pulse quickened. Science lacked nostalgia, owed faith to nobody. She contacted Dr. Mary Manheim at Louisiana State University's Faces Forensic Lab. Over the phone, air crackled with potential. Dr. Manheim explained mitochondrial. DNA passed through maternal lines like a ghostly lullaby that never forgets lyrics. If Margaret could obtain a sample from Bobby's Bruce's direct maternal descendants and compare it with Julia Anderson's living kin, science might hum an answer the courts choked on. Collecting ghosts' first hurdle, convincing family. She gathered at her mother's dining table, sunlight spearing dust, lemon pie cooling, the old rocking chair squeaking as though in warning. Bob JRB folded arms, jaw granite tight. Leave it, he begged. My father was a good man, your grandmother. A saint. Why rip scars open? Margaret inhaled, feeling every heartbeat. Because scars itch for truth, Dad, she whispered, and itching spreads. Eventually Bob JRB relented, more to still the tremor in his own doubts than to fuel hers. Cotton. Swabs arrived via FedEx, sterile sticks in paper envelopes chilled by dry ice of the unknown. Margaret watched her father rub the inner cheek, twist, deposit the swab. He sealed the envelope like a confessional letter to future judgment. Next. She tracked Julia Anderson's lineage. Jan Anderson cousin in Raleigh, a great-granddaughter named Linda MacDonald. The phone call quivered through decades. Margaret, I believe we share a mystery. Linda, we've carried that mystery like a stone. Linda agreed to swab as well, mailing genetic breadcrumbs across state lines. 2 envelopes, 1 Dunbar. 1 Anderson arrived at Faces, placed in freezers colder than courtroom stairs. Waiting with ghost science takes time. Doubt kills by inches. While lab techs coaxed mitochondria into song, Margaret dreamed of Sway's Lake flooding her childhood. Home, water seeping under doors, rising until family portraits floated face down. She awoke gasping, palm clutched around the cloudy marble she'd inherited. Her grandfather, then 89, sat on the porch each dusk, humming the cryptic 3 up, 3 down lullaby. One April evening she joined him, pressed ear to his chest, hearing arrhythmic thuds of a heart that had marched to 2 drums all its life. She considered telling him about the test, but swallowed the urge. Some truths approach like thunderstorms, best not announce them before the first thunderclap. The Calgary 2003, humidity thick enough to sculpt. Dr. Manheim left a voicemail. Margaret replayed it thrice, each time the words sharpened. Mitochondrial profiles show no match between Dunbar line and Anderson sample. Bobby Dunbar is genetically unrelated to Leslie Dunbar's descendants. The air rushed out of Margaret's lungs like steam from a cracked radiator. She sat on the kitchen linoleum, tile cold through denim. 91 years of family lore dissolved in one lab printout. She phoned Linda, voice trembling. Linda wept, relief and vindication mingling until syllables blurred. Bruce came home, she cried, even if no one opened the door, confronting. The patriarch that night, Margaret handed the report to her father. Bob JRB read, fingers whitening at the edges. Silence swelled, thicker than any sermon. Finally he whispered, so he was never. Ours? Margaret placed a hand on his shoulder. He was Dad, just not by blood. Tears cracked his composure. He always feared this day, Bob JRB confessed, carried it like a secret snake in his pocket. He opened a bedside drawer, retrieving the original smoky quartz marble. He said it was weight for stories, but I think it was ballast. For guilt, telling the living, burying the dead. November 2003, Baton Rouge. Margaret, her father, and Linda Anderson faced local news cameras. Reporters smelled headline resurrection, DNA flips 1912 kidnap case. Under studio lights, Bob JRB's eyes shimmered like Sway's water. He spoke slowly. My father lived as Bobby Dunbar, loved us as Bobby Dunbar, but science says he was Bruce Anderson. I choose to honor both names. Viewers across the Gulf Coast felt their own ancestries twitch. How many family legends could withstand a microscope? Meanwhile, William Walter's descendants petitioned the state for posthumous pardon. Julia Anderson's family held a memorial service at a tiny Baptist chapel, placing a stone reading Bruce the boy WHO came home too late. A choir sang Go to Sleep, Little Baby, the lullaby that once echoed down a jail corridor. The sound fluttered through pine rafters, settling on mourners like blessings and ash. The last marble Christmas Eve 2003, Margaret visited her grandfather's grave in Abita Springs Cemetery. She knelt, frost lacing grass blades silver, and placed the smoky quartz marble on the headstone. Moonlight refracted through its cloudy heart, projecting twin halos, one faint, one clear across granite. She whispered, Rest, Pawpaw Bruce. Bobby, wind rustled moss above the tombs, a hush that sounded like a child's long-delayed answer. Here, echoes for the next century. DNA revelation ricocheted through academia, podcasts, documentaries. True crime enthusiasts dissected court transcripts. Genealogists cited the case in lectures about the perils of certainty. A Louisiana senator proposed legislation requiring stricter evidence in custody disputes a century late, but laws like ghosts rarely show up when invited. Sway's Lake became a minor pilgrimage site. Tourists snapped photos of cypress knees, tossing marbles into water with whispered wishes. For hidden stories, find daylight. Locals rolled eyes but secretly counted each marble as a bead on history's growing rosary. And in a North Carolina attic, Julia's letters finally emerged. Linda read them aloud to a family gathering, pages crackling like fireplace logs, sentences stitched with hope and heartache. When she reached the sign off your loving mother, Julia, the room exhaled generations of withheld breath. What science cannot mend, facts clicked into place, but closure remained slippery. The Dunbar descendants felt heritage shift underfoot. Anderson descendants nursed anger at injustice that outlived perpetrators. Margaret wrote a book, weaving both sorrows into a braid, concluding, Ruth is rarely pure, it is muddy water, and we are children still learning not to drown. The rocking chair passed down to Margaret, never moved unbidden again, yet sometimes late at night she swore she heard faint harmonica notes 3 streets away. Perhaps memory itself plays instruments science cannot mute, a voiceover epilogue. To this chapter, so the cheek swab became the real monster in the closet, not a clawed abductor, but a strip of cotton that ripped the mask from a family myth and revealed the human face beneath. Flawed, frightened, fiercely loving, DNA did not resurrect a body. It resurrected a question: who are we when the stories end and the facts remain? In the glow of sequencing machines, Bobby Dunbar vanished for a second time, and Bruce Anderson stepped forward from a century of shadows, eyes wide, asking if the world still had room for him. The answer, like lake water, is complicated, a surface that mirrors the sky while hiding fathoms of tangled roots. But one thing is unassailable: blood remembers what courts and coffins forget, and when memory passes 2 molecules, silence loses. Every trial, Chapter 7, mirrors in the gene pool. Science promised closure, but closure rarely arrives politely. It kicks the hinges off memory and invites itself to dinner. The mitochondrial verdict that crowned Bruce Anderson and retired Bobby Dunbar did not end a story, it multiplied it like reflections between facing mirrors, each image a little smaller, a little blurrier, a little more unsettling than the last family reunion. Fracture Stylister 2004. Margaret organizes a Dunbar Anderson gathering at a rented lodge beside Lake Pontchartrain. Neutral water, neither sways swamp nor Carolina pine. Over potluck gumbo and banana pudding, 3 generations compare cheek swabs and childhood photos. Some cousins clutch the DNA report like scripture. Others shove it beneath casserole dishes, refusing to read verses that threaten genealogical gospel. Bob JRB arrives in a wheelchair, oxygen hiss underscoring each breath. He staggers to a podium of repurposed picnic tables and speaks. Dad lived 88 years feeding us, loving us, teaching us to fish left-handed. If blood says different, blood can take a ticket and stand in line behind love. Applause splinters the tension, but in back rows a few heads shake. Loyalty has different dialects. That night Margaret hears heated whispers on cabin porches. So do we change our last name on the family Bible? Mama's quilting square says Dunbar ain't unsewing it now. If Walters was innocent, state ought to pay back wages on his grave. The reunion ends with half the group scheduling 23 and Meek, it's just to be sure, and the other half vowing they'll never spit in a tube for strangers with microscopes. When everyone departs, the lodge echo carries 2 surnames in alternating cadence: Dunbar, Anderson, Dunbar, like 2 children on a seesaw who refuse to jump first. The Ripple Market B 2006 home DNA tests have become stocking stuffers. Television ads promise to trace Viking roots, reveal Neanderthal percentages, even pair users with wine optimized for your genome. The Dunbar-Anderson saga surfaces in glossy magazines as cautionary tale number 1. Know what you're swallowing. Before you swab, podcast hosts dramatize court transcripts. True crime tours add Sway's Lake to itineraries. See the water that swallowed a name and coughed it up 90 years later. Tourist buses park among cypress knees, guides hand out Fox marble souvenirs stamped real story in gold foil. Local fishermen roll eyes, but a souvenir shack opens anyway, selling harmonicas that play only 3 rising, 3 falling notes, royalty-free eeriness packaged at $12.95. Legal shadows resurrect a William Walters' great-grandson, Clayton. Files a petition in Baton Rouge for wrongful imprisonment compensation, citing DNA exoneration retroactively. Senators host hearings. Archivists testify that evidence storage once meant whatever fit under the sheriff's cot. The state finally issues a symbolic pardon and a check so small it wouldn't cover a modern lawyer's retainer, yet Clayton frames it proof that even slow ghosts may finish their haunt. Across state lines, the Anderson family erects a new headstone for Julia, mother of Bruce Bobby (capturing the paradox). During the unveiling, a thunderstorm slams unexpectedly, rain drumming the grave like long-delayed applause. Linda swears she hears her great-grandmother laugh between thunderclaps, a sound equal parts triumph and exhaustion. No recording devices capture it. Belief has never needed playback. Bob JRB's last ledger, February 2005. Pneumonia closes Bob JRB's lungs. Before slipping into morphine dreams, he beckons Margaret. From his bedside drawer, he produces Percy's journal, the water-smudged one, and adds a final entry. My father belonged to 2 stories. He chose love. I choose the same. He signs both surnames Dunbar and Anderson and hands the volume to his daughter. Hours later, he joins ancestors whose names may never agree, leaving Margaret custodian of doubt and devotion. Foundation built on questions, grief becomes momentum. Margaret launches Mirrors Foundation, funding DNA checks for contested adoption cases. First success, a Texas woman reunites with birth parents long denied by forged records. Reporters ask if Margaret feels redeemed. She answers, redemption is above my pay grade. I just hold up mirrors, people decide if they like the reflection. Double Helix Ethixby 2010 ethicists convene conferences titled Genetic Truth vs. Narrative Truth. Panels debate whether biological fact should veto lived identity. One psychologist cites Bobby Bruce. Imagine waking at 82, find every birthday candle blew out someone else's wish. Another retorts, better unsettling clarity than comfortable fiction. Audience members tweet quotes. The argument trends for an hour, then a celebrity scandal knocks it offline. Attention has shallower memory than DNA. Sways Lake, again May 2012, centennial of the disappearance. Locals host a lantern float. 50 paper boats glide onto the water, each carrying a name written in graphite: Bobby, Bruce, William, Julia, Leslie, Percy. The lanterns bob like cautious fireflies, reflections doubled on the dark surface light. Above, twin light below. A breeze gathers, pushing some lanterns together, others apart. One capsizes, candle sputtering underwater, perfect symbol for a story where identity flipped like a boat in night rain. Margaret attends, pockets heavy with the final smoky quartz marble. She kneels at shore, world hushed but for frogs and camera. Shudders. She considers tossing it to join its twin sunk decades before, but pockets it again. History needs a paperweight, she murmurs, or pages blow in every direction. The algorithm of belonging elsewhere, coders feed the Dunbar case into machine learning models training to solve cold cases. The algorithm draws red lines between missing child reports, rail schedules, census anomalies, a neon spiderweb of might-have-beens. It predicts other identity swaps likely hidden in early 20th century chaos. Newspapers drool at possible sequels. Families brace for genetic truth barrels aimed at their living rooms. A historian warns, when every skeleton hands over dental records, we may wish some closets stayed shut. Generational mirror. Gomez. Margaret's teenage son, Ethan, writes a school essay titled My Great-Grandfather Was Two Boys. He describes inheriting laugh lines from a man whose laugh was once evidence in a courtroom. His teacher circles the title in red and adds, intriguing fiction. Ethan crosses out the comment, writes, real story, Google it, classmates do, half believe, half assume. Creopista. In the digital age, truth competes with fabrication on flat screens where both scroll at the same speed. Christmas 2014, Ethan gifts his mother a framed photo collage. On the left, Bobby in sailor suit. On the right, Bruce's photo from Julia's trunk, the same eyes, different light. A strip of mirrored acrylic runs between, reflecting whichever face stands before it. Margaret hangs it beside the rocking chair. Visitors catch their own faces hovering between the two boys, briefly part of the lineage of ambiguity. The chair's last song, New Year's Eve 2016, the old rocking chair gives a final creak and splinters under its own age. No wind, no child, just a quiet crack like a sigh of relief. Margaret salvages one armrest, carves it into a pen. With it she signs donation papers, handing all family archives, Percy's maps, Julia's letters, Walter's harmonica to Lusu's historical collection. Archivists promise acid-free boxes, climate control, digitization. Story becomes public domain, free to haunt anyone with Wi-Fi. That night, lightning flickers over Sways Lake, though radar shows clear skies. A fisherman later reports hearing faint harmonica notes skimming the water. No one believes him. Then again, belief was never prerequisite for reality here. Voiceover reflection. Look into any mirror. First image bright, next one smaller, then countless echoes vanishing into tunneled infinity. That is what the gene pool became once. A cotton swab stirred its depths, each reflection another identity, another question. Who else might you be? Bobby Dunbar lived the majority of his life believing a courtroom. Bruce Anderson died an unsolved boy inside an old man's skin. Yet both laughed, wept, married, feared storms, loved children. DNA split them but could not choose which memories mattered. Tonight, genetic databases contain codes for millions. Each sequence is an unspoken dare to family myths. Prove me wrong. Some dare, some close the laptop and rock quietly, hoping mirrors never align, but mirrors in the gene pool cannot unbecome. They shimmer under moonlit science, waiting for eyes willing to gaze past the first flattering reflection into diminishing replicas where simpler truths blur. Beyond the microscopes and archives, Sway's Lake keeps its own ledger, ripples counting. Every marble, every lantern, every whispered name dissolved in cattail hush. Water remains neutral. It only returns what seekers toss in. When the last marble sinks, the lake closes again, surface smoothing to a flawless mirror showing sky, swallowing story, and somewhere inside that reflected sky, two boys chase dragonflies in opposite directions, laughing in harmonies only frogs. And wind, remember, DNA may catalog their bones, but wind alone keeps the melody. Chapter 8, The Final Echo. History likes to pretend it ends with a period, but some stories trail off in ellipses, three trembling dots that keep whispering long. After the last page is turned, this real story now reaches the present tense, yet its punctuation is still undecided, still rippling like moonlight over Sway's Lake. 2023, the algorithms killed Rain a generation after DNA overturned Bobby Dunbar's name. The internet weaponizes curiosity. True crime podcasts hiss through earbuds on midnight jogs. TikTok creators stage dramatized readings of Julia's letters, every tear-stained comma rendered in neon captions. Clips go viral, algorithms splice courtroom photographs with lo-fi beats, merging past and present until timelines overlap like palimpsest. Margaret, now graying at the temples, watches one such clip while folding laundry. The effect is jarring. Leslie's sobs looped over trap drums, Bruce's sailor collar tinted aquamarine to match a vaporwave aesthetic. She closes the app, dread churning behind her ribs. When stories migrate into memes, nuance often drowns. Nora's proposition. Enter Nora Cutright, Margaret's 19-year-old granddaughter, journalism major, champion of hot-headed empathy. She proposes a documentary thesis. Mirrors in the bloodstream, HD drones, 4,000 interviews, and most daring and underwater ROV dive at Sway's Lake to search for artifacts lost in 1912. Margaret hesitates. Water swallowed enough already. But new generations hunger for tangible proof, not just paper ghosts. July 17, 2024, Nora pilots a rented drone boat across the murk, sonar pinging cypress root catacombs. The ROV camera noses through submerged branches, silt plumbing like stirred. Ashes suddenly shape, cylindrical 2 feet long, metal loops rusted into spines. The retrieval chlorizes, coughing black water onto deck. It's an antique grappling hook, chain trailing one likely used during the original search for Bobby, rust flakes in Nora's palm. History breathes metallic breath. The hook becomes centerpiece of her film, a physical stand-in for every unanswered question still snagged beneath generational skin. Voices from the archive for narration. Nora samples century-old wax cylinders of Bobby's childhood babble and overlays them with Bruce's descendants reading Julia's letters. The effect, two voices separated by time yet conversing in stereo, sends chill bumps across editing bay interns. A sound engineer notices a pattern. The voices overlap into a chord that echoes the three-note harmonical lullaby. Coincidence? Or proof that stories imprint melodies deeper than melody? Public premiere. Two names on the Marquee, October 31, 2024. Of course, Halloween. Nora's documentary premieres at the New Orleans Film Fest. The marquee lists Dunbar Anderson in flickering neon that can't decide which bulb to burn out first. Inside, the screening room holds descendants from every branch. Dunbars, Andersons, Walter's kin, genealogists, crime bloggers, and a handful of locals who still swear the lake whispers at night. The film ends on a freeze frame of the grappling Hook, water beating like liquid mercury, while Nora's narration asks, what else rusts beneath the surface of our surnames? The credits roll in silence, no music, only the faint creak of chairs as viewers reconsider their own genealogical certainties. Afterwards, Q&A devolves into therapy session. My grandma always said our line changed at Ellis Island. Maybe we should test. What if secrets are the glue, not the crack? An elderly man stands trembling. I knew William Walters's nephew. He died thinking nobody cared. Margaret approaches, presses an heirloom harmonica into his hand, the one Walters played in jail. The man weeps, a century of grief contracting. To a single fragile note, Sway's Lake One Last Lantern Anniversary Night, August 23, 2025, marks 113 years since Bobby vanished. Descendants and documentary fans gather on Sway's bank. Nora distributes biodegradable lanterns shaped like marbles, cobalt-dyed paper glowing from LED candles. One lantern alone shines smoky quartz gray, stitched from repurposed courtroom transcripts. Margaret hands that lone lantern to 7-year-old. Milo Anderson, great-great-grandson of Julia. Voiceover describes the scene. 27 lanterns glide onto water, lights bobbing like forgotten stars. Wind tilts them into a serpentine constellation spelling two faint initials, B and B. Then the gray lantern drifts left, solitary, orbiting the others before surrendering to fog. Cameras catch the moment. Social media explodes, live footage of history forgiving itself, reflections that refuse to lie at each participant, also glimpses something cameras miss, a personal reflection shimmering beside the lanterns. Morphing into childhood faces, ancestors unlabeled in photo boxes, the possibility that their own blood might carry secret stanzas unsung. In that instant they confront the primal horror and wonder welded into the Dunbar or Anderson story. You are never just the name on your passport. You are also every fork in the family road and taken. Margaret's final entry later that night. Margaret sits on the porch where the rocking chair once stood, journal open beneath starlight. She writes, perhaps identity isn't a riddle to solve, but a river to swim, knowing currents may change us, yet we still reach the opposite bank. She closes the cover, breathes, and for the first time feels the water quiet inside her veins. Voiceover epilogue. So here we stand, audience and storyteller alike, at the shore of a lake that never speaks the same rumor twice. We have followed a 4-year-old's disappearance through courtrooms, prison yards, genetic slabs, and flickering screens, only to find the ending loops back to the beginning, a stick spinning circles in water, mothers calling names into wind, a community wrestling the dark for a child it could not define. If you listen tonight, really listen, you might hear that harmonical lullaby drifting on your own street, 3 notes up, 3 notes down, reminding you that truth and love are not opposites. They are coordinates on the same haunted map, and maps, like mirrors, require light to reveal the territory. Look to your lineage. What echoes hide there? What stories beg the light? Sway's Lake is only one mirror. The next could be the still water in your own backyard, waiting for a lantern, waiting for a name whispered twice. Voiceover, steady and urgent. You've just traveled more than a century through courtrooms and chromosomes, through the swamp-soaked mystery of Bobby Dunbar and Bruce Anderson, one of the eeriest identities which real stories ever told. If this journey stirred the waters of your own curiosity, don't let the lantern sink here. Subscribe to Crazy Real Horror Stories for more true tales where history and nightmare blur. Like this video so the algorithm keeps unearthing buried truths. Share the story with someone who thinks their family tree is neatly pruned. Let's see how deep those roots really go. Comment below, what would you do if science rewrote your surname overnight? Hit the bell, keep the lights low, and remember every name has a shadow. Shine your lantern wisely.